What's going on, collectors? This is Uncanny Derek. I love lists, and I love Golden Age skull covers. So this video is about a list of Golden Age skull covers. Stay tuned. And of course, if you like what you see, don't forget to hit like and subscribe down below. So yeah, Golden Age skull covers. Golden Age books are from 1938 to 1956. And during that era was a boom of very interesting artwork. It was kind of a free-for-all when it came to the comic book world. And skull covers specifically are noted on a lot of CGC slabs because they are noteworthy covers. These books are scary. They were still marketed towards kids for the most part, and they kind of were this weird niche book and look that was unique to the Golden Age. When you get to Silver Age horror stories, yeah, there's a handful of really cool skull covers, but the Golden Age really had some unique, frightening imagery along with it, and so I have always loved, as you've noticed already, I like horror, and I love Golden Age horror, and some of these books, we've talked about them before, my top Golden Age video I've done in the past, but I've gone through a total list of, through cover price of these expensive books. Some not as expensive, but I've ranked them all, and we're going to go through all these books together. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about these, and without further ado, let's get started. So I actually do have two honorable mentions because arguably they're skeleton covers, but they're still really awesome books. So the first book I have here is The Unseen. You'll see it's considered one of the best skeleton covers. It is that barber there who is a skeleton, and he's about to presumably maim that man. This is from July of 1954 by Visual Editions Comics, and the cover is done by Mike Roy. In 2024 January, a 6.5 sold for $720. This is all U.S. pricing. But in 2021, a 7.0 sold for $1,900. So a couple of years ago, during the comic book boom, over COVID, the book went for pretty high prices. It's since kind of dropped down because a 6.5 to a 7, like the difference there of more than double the pricing doesn't make a lot of sense. But it's still a very striking cover, and I think this is one of the coolest skeleton slash skull covers that exist out there. My other runner-up that I have here is The Beyond number 25. This is from 1954. This is by Ace Comics, and the cover art is done by Jim McLaughlin. And again, skeletons, but I mean, this is such a cool cover as well. You have these skeleton pilots, and you know, the Tales from the Crypt, like they're having their conversation there. Yes, stewardess, we'll weather the storm. You can tell the passengers will sleep tonight. They'll have a nice long sleep. Oh, the cringe. And a 4.0 of this sold just recently in March of 2024 for $1,700. In 2022, a 6.5 sold for $10,000. So pretty cool looking book and cool cover. It's technically not a skull cover, but I just feel both these books that are honorable mentions because they are just really awesome skeleton slash skull covers. But let's get into the thick of things. So the first book, actually, I don't have any sales data on. It is Shadow Comics Volume 2, number 10. And this is from January of 1943 by publisher Street and Smith. We don't know who the cover artist is. And this cover, although there's no sales data, Derek, why is this comic in your list? Because it doesn't have any sales data and you're trying to rank this? Well, this is number 18 on the list because of this reason. It's just a really awesome cover. You got these crime fighters. I got the comic up on my screen here. They're shooting out of the skull. I mean, I don't know what's going on. It's kind of out of like a Mad Max style, not Mad Max, Mighty Max type of setup there. You got these gangsters shooting at the Shadow out of the skull base. I don't know. There's the hand sticking up. It's just a really awesome cover, and I feel like it needed to be on the list as well. Arguably, it could have been an honorable mention, but hey, the last one on my list doesn't have any sales data. We go from 0 to 100 pretty quickly here. So my next cover here is Night of Mystery. There's no number to this. It's an Avon one-shot. And Avon, as you may have seen in my top 25 Golden Age books. I had a handful of Avon books on there. A lot of them are just one shots as well. I always felt that Avon had a lot of really awesome horror books that were just there and they didn't go anywhere. And their covers are really great too. And this Night of Mystery one, it has such a like a to me, it reminds me of a video game from the 80s for Nintendo called Clash at Demon Head. And the villain from there, Guy Cott was his name. That's who I see in this cover. And I just think it's a really awesome cover. There is a version of this book that sold, it was a raw copy of this book, a 1.5 to a 2.5 range in 2022 that sold for $200. This is all US pricing again. And I mean, it's just a really weird kind of cover. You got that skyline in the background, but you also have the top hat skull kind of ghostly reaching out towards the people there. So really cool looking cover. And yeah, it's just I could stare at this cover all day because it's the goofiness almost of the skull. It, of course, the top hat is just, yeah, really interesting book. So next up is Kid Eternity here. And so this book is CGC Pedigree. It says, you'll notice this at the top right there, it says skull cover. And the cover here is done by Al Bryant. This is from May of 1949, and it's done by Quality Comics. And this skull cover, this image here is from Heritage Auctions. It is 9.8, which is crazy for a Golden Age book, but it is from the Promise Collection. That's a pedigree that one day I'll make a video about pedigrees, but it's a well kept comic book, more or less. And this book here, there isn't a lot of sales data for it. 5.0 sold for $480. A 2.5 in 2024 sold for $450. And that 5.0 sold last year in 2023. But then we have this 9.8. This one here sold for $5,500, and that was back in 2021. So that's that's a huge wide range. But even $5,500 in 2021 is not that much money for a 9.8, especially in 2021 being the big comic boom, right? Over COVID. So this book here, I feel, is undervalued because it's just a cool skull cover for one, and also a 9.8 selling for $5,000 during the crazy COVID times is insane. So this is a great, cool looking book. So I have this here as number 16. Next up, I have another copy of Shadow Comics. This is Volume 9, number 5. This is again by Street and Smith in 1949. No idea who the cover artist is. And a book for this here, a 4.0, sold in 2024 in February for $408. It's actually the only copy of this book that I could find on cover price for a sale. And it's a very neat looking version of how they did a skull. It kind of almost looks like 8-bit art. They got the skull there being the house, kinda, sorta. It's just done very cleverly. I love how the color scheme works, of course, but just how this light illuminates on the house slash forest slash whatever you want to call this. It's just a really cool. I want my house to look like this, to be honest with you. And then we go over to Witchcraft number 6. This is from March of 1953, another Avon book. Covers by A.C. Hollingsworth. And in 2023, a 4.5 sold for $585. See the cover there, the evolution of the skull, the man's, or the whatever's happening there. The guy coming from the house turning into a skull, chasing the guy down the street. Just really neat, cool skull cover there. Next up is probably my favorite skull cover. This is Mysterious Traveler Comics number 1. I just think that this cover is fantastic. The idea of this skull train coming down the track. And of course you got that guy there who doesn't have a face because he's the Mysterious Traveler. This is a book from 1948 by Transworld. The cover art is done by Bob Powell. And a 3.5 of this book sold for $823, but a 7.5 in 2023 sold for $1,750. So, last year, higher grade version of the book sold for a decent chunk of change. I think it's probably one of the coolest covers that exist. Unfortunately, it's not something that everybody else sees because that's a pretty low price point for it. But I think that this cover is the epitome of Golden Age skull covers. Like it literally screams skull cover on it, and just the idea of the horror, and it's a great cover. I love it. I love it. Next up is again kind of arguably a skeleton cover, but it's mainly all skull. This is Haunted Thrills number 15 from 1953. 1954. It's by Ajax, and I don't know who the cover artist is for it. This here is an 8.0. This one sold for 7,800 in 2022. But a 4.0 in March sold for 1,025. So this is a book that is that 7,800 the true price point for it? Because again, over COVID, everything was bubbled. Probably not. But in March of 2024, a 4.0 sold for 1,000. Yeah, I mean, maybe it is. It's tough to say. But I just, again, this book cover is very similar to the pilot one I had just shown, where you have this skull kind of making the wise cracks to the passengers on the plane or in the car here, and yeah, it's a great cover. I love. It's unfortunate that the title takes up so much space, but again, the close up shot of that skull, you just kind of know that the skull's just like kind of cackling to itself, doing its thing. It's an awesome cover. I love it. I love it. And then we go to Strange Mysteries number 15. And this is a book. This is where we're starting to get into pretty high dollar value books. So in April of 2024, a 5.5 sold for 2,800. 5.5 isn't it's a pretty good grade for a book of this age. This is from 1954 by Superior Comics. We don't know who the artist is on this one. But the idea of it's a skull cover, but it's also the skeleton hands reaching towards the lady in the red dress. These are all common tropes of the Golden Age books. It's just really cool, and I can see books like this here really starting to go up in value, especially in higher grades, because having a black cover book in a high grade from a time back then is very difficult to come by. So I foresee books like this going up in value, but it's just, again, cool skull cover. Next up is Witchcraft number 2. This is yet another Avon book. This is from May of 1952. We don't know who the artist is for it. And a 3.5 in 2022 sold for $1,400, but a 2.5 in November 2023, so literally a year later, sold for $1,460. So this book is increasing in value. A lower grade version of this book sold for more than the higher grade version of this book. So this is a book that, for a skull cover, the sky's the limit with it. That's not to say that these few one-off sales are going to dictate the pacing of the book, but it goes to show you that there is a demand for these skull covers, and people are willing to pay a lot for a little, so to speak. This skull cover is the only black skull cover that I have on the list, and really one of the only black skull covers I think that I have seen for a Golden Age book. And very well done. Obviously, the kind of the reflection of those people I don't feel are trapped in the skull, that they are being looked at, and this is the reflection of them in the book. So I think it's a really awesome and clever cover with that. Next up, we have Dark Mysteries number 2. This is from 1951, and it is a Master Publications. This is a Wally Wood cover, and I remember when I first came across this book, I knew immediately it was a Wally Wood, even though his name isn't on it, because if you just look at the positioning of the character, that's such a Wally Wood, that's such a Wood thing to do. And actually, I think that might be his name right there in the pocket, maybe. I can't get a good glimpse of that, but that could be his signature there in the newspaper sticking out of the guy's pocket. The skull cover is really cool. I just love that you have the skulls kind of concaved into the side. There's somebody sitting in the skull there, and it's kind of this guy is running away from. I get like King Kong Skull Island kind of vibes from it. This giant skull, the people surrounding it, and you have the maybe that he's a reporter, I'm not sure, stumbling across the island, now being chased away by it. This book here has, in October 23, sold for $960. There was a sale in 2021, an 8.5 sold for $4,500. So there's a wide range of pricing for this book. Again, 2021 is COVID bubble. I'm going to keep repeating that. So maybe there's some exaggeration in that pricing, but for a Wally Wood skull cover, that's I think that's a steal of a deal there. My next book on this list is Haunted Thrills number 5 from 1953, and it's an Ajax book. There's a suggestion that it may be a Joe Doolin cover, but unfortunately I don't know who the artist is for this. 6.5 for this one in October of 2022, sold for $7,800. That's pretty much the only artwork I can, or not artwork, that's pretty much the only price point I can confirm with this book. But 2022 COVID bubble, $7,800. That seems still pretty reasonable for a skull cover of the Golden Age. And this cover, it's a mix of skeletons and skulls. You got these skeletons kind of spewing out of this green skull on the cover. It's just a really kind of eerie and creepy book. And the skeletons don't even really, they're maybe zombies because they just look different. They're just strange looking creatures, and really awesome cover. But then we get into even more awesome covers, I feel, with Strange Mysteries number 12. And this is from July of 1953. The artist is unknown for this one as well, unfortunately. But in February, a 5.0 in February 2024 sold for $3,400. To give you an idea for range, a 7.5 in 2021 sold for $9,600. So that book, if a 5.0 sold for $3,400 just recently, I imagine that $9,600 has gone up. Again, even though it was during COVID bubble, I feel that those types of prices, especially if a new one sells at a low grade, sells for that much, I imagine that everything adjusts. So on this cover here, we have more skeletons coming out of a skull, but even stranger, you got the skeletons coming out with a casket. And I can't imagine what would be in a casket that's being carried by skeletons, because would it just not be another skeleton? And if not, or if it is, then why isn't it walking? Maybe it's an empty box? I don't know. But I think the cover is just really cool, solely for that reason. You have these skeletons carrying a dead body, but they're skeletons. So it's what are you doing? Next up is a book that is definitely in a lot of people's top horror books. This is in my Golden Age, top 25 Golden Age books. You'd recognize this cover. It's a very common book, Startling Terror Tales number 11. This is from August of 1952 by Star. It's an L.B. Cole cover, and this is the quintessential horror book, horror cover in my opinion. One of them. You got that spider skull creature on there, and it is just super cool. You got the shrunken heads. You got the lady in distress, the man who's dead on the cover. It is just it's always been such a striking cover. And yeah, this book has gone for a pretty penny over the years. So I have a 5.0 in April of 2024, sold for $10,200. But a 6.5 in August of 2023, so post-bubble, sold for $33,350. So my most recent sale for a 5.0 is 10.2. A 6.5 sold for $33,000. Now, that would suggest that the August book at 6.5, you're going for a 5.0 to a 6.5, that the pricing would be coming down on that book. But because of books like this, where the scarcity exists, and it's also such an important horror book, I don't feel that $33,000 price point is outrageous for the 6.5, because there's not many on census for that, and it's like the book. So 33.5 or 33,350, that doesn't seem outrageous, even though our recent sales less. This is one of those books where 0.5s will scale dramatically for it, but besides the point, it's again an awesome book. I talk about this book in my top 25 Golden Age, so you can hear me gush about it in there. This next book is really neat. It's a Blue Bolt's Weird Tales. So This is issue 115, but in issue 111, Blue Bolt was a superhero. And much like how Captain America turned into Captain America Weird Tales, that's kind of what happened with Blue Bolt. He was a superhero, and it was, the series of comics were in the 50s, because this is from 1952 by Star Publications. They were going into horror. And so superhero books were changing into horror books. And so in issue 111, this went from Blue Bolt Comics to Blue Bolt Tales of Terror, changing from superhero to horror. This is another L.B. Cole book, and prices for this, because L.B. Cole, I didn't mention it before, but he is a renowned Golden Age artist. This book is crazy in terms of its price points, and I think it's just an awesome creepy cover, because you got guys getting killed on the cover. There's blood in between the fingers of the skeleton there, but it is predominantly a skull cover with golden wavy hair. A 9.2 in September of 2023 sold for $9,600. In February of 2024, a 3.5 sold for $2,250. So there's a range there. A 3.5 is, the low end is $2,250. A 9.2 is $9,600. So there's a huge range there. But a 9.6 in 2017, so pre-COVID, went for $16,730. So handful of things about that price point is that that's going to be an even more expensive book now, because that was 2017. And in 2023, post COVID, a 9.2 sold for $9,600. Like, that's going to be at least $25,000 book now. A 9.6. A 9.6 for a Golden Age book is insane, much like the Promise Collection one. And that 9.6, to get a 9.6 in a black cover is nuts, especially for Golden Age. You get because the spine ticks are very obvious. Everything's more pronounced, like issues with the book. So that is crazy that a 9.6 exists at all. And yeah, that's a great price point in my opinion. All right, so now we get to our book number 4 on the list. This one here is Mysterious Adventures number 13 from 1953. This is by Story Comics, and the cover is by Dick Beck. And this is a weird one because personally, I'm not familiar with Dick Beck, and I'm not too familiar with the series, to be honest with you. But there's some major sales for this book, and that's why it's so high on the list. So it's kind of a weird one for me. And I do like the cover. It's this man who's being burned alive in a skull. That's okay, sure. And so a book for this here, a 3.0, sold in March of 2024 for $1,140. So that's reasonable for a Golden Age book. But an 8.0 sold in 2021 for $18,000. So that is a bubble, or a book that was sold during a bubble. But even still, it's a book that isn't a big deal. Like, if we were to compare Startling Terror Tales or even the Blue Bolt we just went over, and the books we're gonna see, this was just a book that I was like, wow, that's a pretty expensive book for something I'm not familiar with at all. And I'm relatively familiar with a lot of Golden Age books, and I found this one here to be shockingly expensive for where it is on the list. So it's a cool cover, I'll give it that much. But I mean, again, I don't know who Dick Beck is, and it sold for a lot of money. So hey, kudos to the person who bought it, and maybe I'm missing something here. I obviously have to do a lot more research into characters like this, but really cool cover regardless. Yeah, Mysterious Adventures number 13. This next book, we're getting to the top 3 here. I love this cover. It's Gangsters Can't Win number 2. This is from 1948 by DS Publishing Company, and the cover is by George Gregg. This cover is just awesome. I think about this cover, and there's Punch Comics number 12, which may show up on my list shortly. Just the idea of crime and skulls, and like this is such a clever use of the skull. Like you have the eyes as jails, and again, I mentioned Mighty Max earlier. This reminds me of Mighty Max again. This whole play set, if you have the skull that you can play around and hide characters, but you have this lady who's or this guy who's punching this lady on this cover. You have the criminals behind bars. You have a guy that looks like he's drilling into the skull to escape on the far right. It's a weird cover, but it's also very clever with how it's using the skull. And there's a lot of detail into the skull, like the whole ear piece there, the bones around the ear. Like it's just a really neat cover. And so price point for this book is pretty high, especially because it's it is Golden Age 1948. 4.5 in February of 2024, sold for $2,040. In 2022, during the bubble, a 9.4, which exists of this book, which is insane again, sold for $26,400. So you get a book like this here. If we could see it in high grade, that would be wonderful. But this is $26,000 book in a high grade. But even a 4.5 selling for over $2,000, that's crazy too. It's like Gangsters Can't Win is one of the more popular crime books that existed out there. But yeah, this cover is just screams Golden Age on it, in my opinion, because it's also done in such a comic book format too, right? So number 2 is always one of the weirdest covers that exist, and it is titled properly because of it. It is Weird Mysteries number 4 from April of 1953. It is by Gilmore Publishing, and it's Bernard Bailey cover. And this book here always gives everybody the heebie-jeebies, because what the heck is happening? You got the skull with clearly the person died with a knife through it, but then you have this ant creature guy coming out of the skull. It's so weird because the perspective of the cover doesn't make a lot of sense. In the background, you have that house, and I mean the skull is definitely in the foreground, so scaling it should make sense, but like the ant's the same size as the skull almost, which ants are not. And then you have like the distance of that house isn't far enough back really to know that that skull is small or big. It seems too big, and then the knife is stabbed through the head, and obviously knives are bigger than skulls too, or bigger than ants too. So it's just a whole weird book, and you got that ant that's like drooling out of it, and obviously the ant has a man's face to it with elf ears, and it's so bizarre. But this book here is considered one of the more cooler Golden Age books. I've personally, like, it didn't make my list of my top 25, but it is one of the cooler books. I just find it a bizarre book. If I ever do a video of weird covers, this is definitely going to be on the list. But it's never a book that really struck me as something that I desire. But price points and sales show otherwise. So a 7.0 of this book in 2023 sold for $43,200. So that's the most recent sale I could find for it. So that's out of the bubble. But this book is always in such high demand, so that price does not seem outrageous for it, for being the disturbing, bizarre cover that it is. And even like the teeth on the skull, like the teeth get removed, like it's just the teeth are part of the skull. It's weird, and the perspective of the skull's messed up because like the eyes are not supposed to be that close to the nose. It's weird, but it mission accomplished for the cover. And then lastly, we get to the number one skull cover. It's Punch Comics number 12, and this was in my top 25 Golden Age books as well. This is from January of 1945. It's Harry A. Chesler, publisher, and Gus Rucka did the artwork on it. And this book is wild. It's a hot book still. What can be said about this cover that hasn't already been said, especially in my previous video? But it is just quintessential crime. And you have all this crazy stuff happening on the cover. This lady who may be dying, I don't know, falling out of the skull around the teeth. There is the man who is dead coming out of the eye, dropping the money. You got this Dick Tracy-like character shooting the bad guys who are crawling over the skull, and there's a little man peeking out behind the nose. It's just such a cool cover, and of course the skull itself is such heavily detailed. You got the crack just above the one eye. It's so much action and so much intrigue in the cover, and to have a crime book have a horror cover is unusual on its own. But this book has just been blowing up in price. So to give you an idea, in terms of pricing, and just to let you know where this book has been in the past little bit, this book recently broke some records for itself, and for Golden Age skull covers. So at 8.0 in September 2023, sold for $204,000, which is crazy. Crazy. Heritage Auction had it for the 8.0, and I remember seeing that auction happen. But over $200,000 for this comic book. Again, black cover, to have a high quality black cover like this is nuts. Especially again for the age 1945. So this is one of the earliest skull covers that does exist. And then we have in April of 2024, so just this month, a 5.5 sold for $60,000, which is also crazy. Another one, a 4.5, sold again this month. So we had two books in April sold, a 4.5 and a 5.5. The 5.5 sold for $60,000. A 4.5 sold for $34,000. So, like, the difference of that 1 point grade is 34 to 60. That's nuts. That's literally almost double the price. So to go from that 60 to that 204 for an 8, like, that's exponential growth. A 5.5 to an 8, that doesn't... It's nuts. So this book here is hot. And I expect prices to continue to be on this upswing for it. It is the #1 most expensive book on the skull cover list, and arguably, because of how everything's been selling with it, it is the most important and the most popular skull cover to exist too. So yeah, great book. And that's my list there. So let me know what you guys think. Leave some comments and I'll respond to them all. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. We got some clickable things here. You can check my Golden Age skull cover video, of course. And thanks for watching.